Grace and peace to you this morning from God our Father and the Lord Jesus Christ. Amen. I feel a little rusty up here. It's been since December 24th, Christmas Eve, that I've brought you a message. I've noticed over the course of the last month, or actually on the front of your bulletin, it says services at Christ Lutheran last between 60 and 75 minutes. And for the past month, we've been veering down towards 60. So one of my goals today is to veer us right back up to 75. All right. Aren't we excited? So in our house right now, a lot of you know this, we've got a 1-month-old and a 2-year-old. And one thing Christy and I have been remarking on lately is the big difference, the dramatic difference that is between a newborn and a toddler, right? And I don't mean just like size-wise, although that's part of it, but maybe even more so developmentally. You see, right now, Levi, that's our 1-month-old, he's always just kind of like, literally, and you can be like, hey, buddy, hey, Levi, guess what? And the most you're going to get out of it is, or maybe, if you're lucky, it's like, oh my goodness, did we give birth to a giant amoeba, right? And so whereas I was really hoping he would give me some fresh sermon material to come back with, he's just kind of basic right now, like eat, sleep, diaper change, repeat, right? Eat, sleep, diaper change, repeat. Eat. So it's very basic. And so you see the kid's not giving me anything sermon-wise, but thankfully we also have a toddler in the house. And for Paul in particular, that's our 2-year-old, it seems like literally almost every single day he's doing something new. It's fun. In fact, right now in particular, it's a great stage. He's kind of coming into this stage where he's beginning to have a strong sense of self, or a stronger sense of self. And what I mean by that is he's beginning to get more and more of a grasp of his identity, who he is, right? And so sometimes what we'll do is we'll ask him, hey, buddy, who are you, right? That's just kind of like a basic identity question. We're in a sermon series on identity. Maybe it's going to tell you. You never know. But we'll say, who are you? And he'll always go, Paul, which he always says the AU, Paul. And then we'll be like, okay, buddy, what's your middle name? And then it's Wowentz. So you can't say it's ours. It's Lawrence. So it's Wowentz. And then what's your last name? And then he always looks around for like a couple seconds, like, I don't know what it is. I think he's pretending. Because then he smiles and he goes, Simpson. And then he always strings it together multiple times, right? Paul Wowentz Simpson. Paul Wowentz Simpson. And so then I'll point to Christian. I'll say, who's that? And he'll say, Mommy. Who am I? Daddy. Who's your brother? Baby Levi. It's always Baby Levi, right? And then finally, we always ask, who are your buddies? Max and Ian. It's the parse, right? Max and Ian. And so it's fun for us. You can just see it happening. We love it. That he's got this growing sense of identity, meaning he's kind of figuring out his place in the world. He's kind of figuring out where he belongs. A big part of that is he's figuring out to whom he belongs. And so the thing about it, he's got this basic but growing grasp that he is actually someone who is unique. Not to mention that he is actually someone who is neat. I think he knows he is neat. You can tell by how enamored his parents are. Not to mention that he is actually someone who is loved. And you see, as he begins to grasp all of this, that this is his lot in life, that this is his identity, what's so fun for us, there is this joy that he has with knowing who he is. Put it simply, he loves being who he is. So here's the thing about this. We're in the second week of our sermon series on identity, like I kind of alluded to. And I think one of the main goals with this series, or at least one of my personal goals with it, is for each of us to think a little more clearly about the question, who are you? Who are you? In other words, do you have a strong sense of your identity? And if so, is it something that you can actually rejoice over? Do you love being yourself? You see, because I would argue that God himself has offered us an identity that we would actually love being if we grew into it. So today, what we're looking at in particular is what it means to have a baptismal identity. It's like, baptismal identity? Like, what does that even mean? It's Christianese, just to let you know. It's like insider language. Baptismal identity, what I mean by that is baptism is actually meant to be the main marker of a Christian's identity. And I know we don't typically think of it that way, at least I don't, but that is actually what it is. It's incredibly foundational to who we are as a people. In fact, that's why a lot of churches, including ours, we put a baptismal font right at the entrance. What that's really meant to convey is if you're part of this, this is your identity. And so what we're going to do today, we're going to spend a good amount of time looking at this one particular question. It's, where do you and I locate our identity? Meaning, how do you know who you really are? Do you know who you really are? And how do you know that? So this is talk about your place. All this talk about your place in the world, your purpose. You hear it all the time. How do you know who you were created to be? This is what I want to look at. And before we go to the answer that God himself has given us in and through baptism, I want to look at the answer that our culture gives us. Because, man, we swim in that cultural water without even knowing it, right? So the thing is, there's this book by a guy named Trevin Wax. He wrote a book called Rethink Yourself. And so I'm essentially just going to steal everything he said. I think it's Mark Twain who said the key to originality is to conceal your sources. Too tired to do that, right? So Trevin Wax, Rethink Yourself. If you don't like what I'm about to say, blame him, okay? But what the book does is it just kind of identifies a roadmap that our culture gives us. It kind of feeds it to us. It's built into the structure we live in, structure of society, that is. But it gives us this for knowing who we are. And in particular, what he points out, this Trevin Wax, is if you want to know who you really are, kind of our basic cultural assumption is you got to look first inward, and then outward, and then upward. So inward, outward, upward. We're going to unpack what each of those means, but the key move in this is if you want to know who you are, you want to discover your identity, you've got to first look inside yourself. In fact, I found this fascinating. A full 91% of Americans, this is a Gallup poll, but a full 91% of Americans agree with the following statement. The best way to find yourself is by looking within yourself. So in 2013, there's a very popular philosopher. She's probably one of the most popular philosophers of our day and age, and she's a huge proponent of this whole move of looking inward. She actually put together a song that kind of just captures the whole thing. And so I'm just going to read the lyrics. I'm not going to try to sing it. You don't want Pastor Garrett busting out in song, right? And I think you can kind of pick up, though, as you hear it, what she's getting at in terms of where you find your identity. So here it goes. It says, "The wind is howling like this swirling storm inside. Couldn't keep it in. Heaven knows I tried. Don't let them in. Don't let them see. Be the good girl you were always meant to be," right? "Conceal, don't feel. Don't let them know. Well, now they know." You ready? "Let it go. Let it go." Right? So can't hold it back anymore. Turn away and slam the door. I don't care what they're going to say. Let the storm rage on. Oh man, this is horrible, right? The cold never bothered me anyway. So there you go. Like I said, probably the best philosopher of the 21st century, Elsa from Frozen. And the thing is, I bring this up because it is totally capturing something. If you don't think Disney's discipling your kids, think again, right? Some of you who work for Disney, think about your call in that space, right? Side note. Namely, it is capturing this idea, Frozen. It's capturing this idea that if you want to know the real you, you look inward. Meaning you've got to get in touch with your deepest desires. What do you really want? What are your feelings? What do you most deeply want? What do you identify as? These are the questions of our culture. And the assumption that's just kind of embedded into the questions themselves is that your identity is something you find within. People just assume that's how you're going to find out who you are. You identify yourself by looking within. So that's inward. I don't know if I want to get off on a tangent. I don't have this in my notes. But this whole movement has a traceable history. I think we just kind of think it came out of nowhere. We have to do this. It can be traced back to a guy named Jean-Jacques Rousseau. Jean-Jacques Rousseau was a philosopher in the 1700s. He's the father of what's called the Romantic movement, Romanticism. By Romanticism, I don't mean like, hey, baby, let me take you on a date. It's not what it is. It was a reaction against the rationalism of the Enlightenment. Maybe the main thing to know about the Romantic movement is they were deniers of the fall. They were deniers of the fall. And so what they thought is if you looked inward, you were going to find a heart that is totally pure, totally clean, totally trustworthy. And so hence the turn inward. If you want to know who you are, look inward. The problem's not you, it's the civilizational structures that have surrounded you and kind of repressed, and you need to release who you really are. Let it go, right? So that's the traceable history. We need to be aware of that sort of stuff. So that's inward, the inward turn. That's a questionable assumption, though, right? Just before we move on, that we're totally pure inside. Anyway, after that, look inward and then look outward is next. Look outward. And what's meant by that is you look for people who are going to celebrate and support this real you. And so that means not necessarily your family. They might not. That also means not necessarily the people you grew up with, because maybe you were hiding all along, right? But the people who embrace this inner you, that is your tribe, is the language we use. And so once you find them, so you got inward, outward, then you look upward. Meaning you look for some sort of God or spirituality or church that will bless all of this. And so the church you go to, if you go to church, it has got to be a church that agrees with you. Since when is the church supposed to just tell you what you already agree with? Like right now, if you're thinking, I don't agree with it, I don't care. It's not the point. It is weird, but that is the predominant spirituality of our culture, where instead of having a faith that actually confronts and corrects us, we want a faith that comforts and coddles us. But again, it's rooted in this roadmap of finding yourself. You want to know who you are. That question of identity. First, look inward. Then look outward. Find your tribe. Then finally, look upward. What kind of church or spirituality is going to jive with that? And that is what we see all over our cultural landscape. And I would make the case that it is not working. It's not working. And what I mean by that is that we are not becoming more ourselves by following this roadmap to identity. But instead, we're just becoming increasingly lost and confused, both as individuals and as a culture. We have no clue who we are. So one of my favorite preachers is a guy named John Mark Comer. If you're at the annual meeting last week, I referenced him. He likes to say this saying. He says that the more sorry, try to say it again. It's a hard saying. The more Jesus-ier you become, the more you-ier you become. That's what he says. And it's horrible English, right? If you're an English teacher or a teacher in general, you probably just spit up in your mouth a little bit, like, oh, I'm not going to listen to this guy. I hate him already. But you see, what he's saying, it's a good idea. He says we need a way for our identity to be wrapped up in the identity of Jesus. If only because it's only in Jesus that we discover who we were really meant to be. And so the more Jesus-ier you become, what you're going to find is the more you-ier you become. It brings out your real self. So with that, let's go to baptism. This is going to be about that. One of the things that baptism communicates about finding your identity is you got to go upward first. Go upward first. And then you go outward and inward. And so just kind of the reverse order, right? Instead of inward, outward, upward, it's upward, outward, inward. And I want to go through each of those. So upward first, meaning if you want to know who you are, the very first move you've got to make is look to God. What does He say about you? So when I was a little kid, one of my mom's brothers got divorced and remarried a couple times. Truth be told, all four of my mom's brothers got divorced and remarried multiple times. It's a family tradition, right? But this one in particular, his second marriage was to a woman who had two grown kids. They were both in their 20s. Their names were Amy and Brett. So the guy in particular is what I want to talk about. And the thing about Brett, a great guy. I loved him. Really good guy. A lot of fun to be around, but you see, he had some really severe psychological problems. If he took his medication, you could never tell. And yet without it, he would literally go through severe psychological episodes for days. So this one time in particular, he went off his medication, just stopped taking it, no one knows why. And for a couple days, he totally disappeared. Like, where is Brett? No one knows. He lived at home with them. And eventually what happened is they found him. By they, I mean police officers found him. And what he was doing, he was walking down the middle of a busy road with no clothing on. And so when the police apprehended him for this, he obviously didn't have any ID on him. And so they asked an identity question. Who are you? Who are you? And he gave the answer that is the answer to every Sunday school question. Kids in the room, this is your bonus tip for this morning. What is the answer to every Sunday school question? Jesus. He was convinced that he was Jesus. Here's the thing about that. This is going to sound totally crazy, right? From me saying this, but I think he was so incredibly close to saying something so utterly true. Like, what in the world? Is he recommending we streak down McBean after the service? Like, yeah. That's not what I'm saying, okay? Just to be clear, nor am I saying that we should somehow self-identify as Jesus. In fact, to the extent that we do that, we probably need some medication. And so just to make myself clear, you and I, we are not Jesus, nor should we identify as Jesus. And yet, with that being said, the message of baptism is that God has identified us with Jesus. It's close, right? Instead of being identified as Jesus, we are identified with Jesus. So let me try to explain that. In our passage that we read from Romans at the beginning of this, it's all about baptism, and in particular, it's all about the identity of baptism, or living into your identity as a baptized person. And so in verse 3 in particular, it says this. It says, when you get baptized, quote, into Christ. So when you were baptized into Christ is what it says. And you see that little phrase, into Christ, or elsewhere in the Bible, you also in the New Testament, you'll see this phrase, in Christ. It's in Greek, en Christo. And that particular phrase, you've probably seen it before. In fact, you've probably seen it a bunch. It occurs over 150 times in the New Testament, most of the time in Paul's letters. And what systematic theologians sometimes refer to it as is what they call incorporation, is what they say. Incorporation, meaning, what they mean by that is you get incorporated into Christ. Maybe the more historic word for it is that you get incorporated into, quote, union with Christ. And whatever language you want to use, that's not the point. What that phrase, in Christ or into Christ, is getting at. It's this idea, and I want you to hear this idea. It's this idea that everything that is true for Jesus is now also true for you. Again, everything that is true for Jesus, if you're in Christ, is now also true for you. And so if you just think about this, think about the baptism of Jesus. In fact, if I can just read the passage to you, it's from Matthew 3. I'm going to read it. This is beginning of verse 16. Matthew 3, it says this. It says, when Jesus was baptized, immediately he went up from the water, and behold, the heavens were opened to him, and he saw the Spirit of God descending like a dove and coming to rest on him. So it comes up out of baptism, Spirit of God descends, and then it says, behold, a voice from heaven said, this is my beloved Son, with whom I am well pleased. And so you look at that. What is the identity of Jesus? This is telling us about the identity of Jesus. It's two things, but they totally go together. You can't really pull them apart. But two things. He is beloved by the Father. This is my beloved Son. He's beloved by the Father, and as part of that, secondly, he's indwelt by the Spirit. So what is the identity of Jesus? Two things. Beloved by the Father, indwelt by the Spirit. Can I have you say it with me? What is the identity of Jesus? He is beloved by the Father, indwelt by the Spirit. Just one more time. Identity of Jesus. He is beloved by the Father, indwelt by the Spirit. And you see, here's the thing that I want you to hear. Everything that is true for Jesus is now also true for who? You. And so who are you? You are beloved by the Father, and you are indwelt by His Spirit. Everything that's true for Christ is also true for you. You're beloved by the Father. You're not someone He doesn't know. You're not some stranger to Him. You're not someone He doesn't care about. You are loved by your God, and as part of that, you are indwelt by His Spirit. The same Spirit that dwells in Jesus dwells in you. And what I want to suggest to you is that is the most important thing about who you are. Not other people's opinions, not how you look, not how you feel, not what you do. You are not your desires. You are not your deeds. You are not your job. Your identity is located in none of those things. It is located in the fact that you are beloved by the Father and indwelt by His Spirit. That is who you are. Or at the very least, that is the gift that He has held out to you in and through your baptism into Christ. Will you claim it? It's the question that hangs over that. So first, you want to know who you are? Look upward. No more navel gazing, that means. Also, no more people pleasing. Come on, just stop. Just look at what God says about you, please. So upward first, and then second, look outward. Look outward. And what do I mean by that? Let me try to explain. So the night I came to faith, it was that I've shared a little bit about this before. But I was 17. I was up at a Christian camp up at Hume Lake Christian Camps. It was 2000, year between my junior and senior year of high school. So right after the service, I come to faith right after the service, like 500 kids in the auditorium. They just all scattered. And yet what happened is one of our adult leaders or chaperones had stayed behind. He was this guy that went to master's college. He was actually from Argentina. He spoke with this like really thick accent. You could barely understand him. And his name was Gustavo. Gustavo, that's his name. We like to say it during the week. He was actually our cabin leader for the week. And so he stayed behind after the service. And the thing is, I will never forget Gustavo. I will never forget him. If only because he was the very first person to pray for me after I came to faith. So he comes over, we sit down in this pew, and what he prays, it's in broken English. You can like barely understand the guy. But what I distinctly remember is he goes, Lord, I pray for my brother Garrett. He calls me his brother. Lord, I pray for my brother Garrett, who is now closer to me than my own biological brothers. And I'm just like, what? It was a prayer that struck my ears as very strange. See, the thing about Gustavo, a good guy and all, don't get me wrong, but not someone I have a lot in common with. Nor was someone I would like identify with, right? We were from totally different places. We wore totally different clothing. In fact, that whole week, our cabin continuously ribbed him for brushing his teeth every night wearing his whitey-tidies. And so when he prays the prayer, I'm just like, no. No, dude, we're not very similar. In fact, the only thing we have in common is this Jesus. You see, here's the thing about that. The longer I have been a Christian, and maybe more specifically, the more I've come to see Jesus as my identity. That prayer was spot on. I don't know Gustavo's brothers, so can't say much about that. But what I do know is he's my brother. Same spirit, which gives you the same spiritual DNA, you could say. See, this isn't one of our passages today, but in Hebrews 11, it gives this long list of people who have lived the faith with passion and courage. It's a beautiful passage, Hebrews 11. It's actually our reading next week as we talk about faith. But Hebrews 11, it gives this long list of people who have lived this beautiful life. And then what happens is you transition to chapter 12, and it says this. This is how it starts. It says, therefore, since we are surrounded by what? A great cloud of witnesses. Let us lay aside every weight and run the race that is set before us. And so you see, the thing is, if you want to know who you are, or at the least if you want to know what you have been baptized into, first look upward, first move, beloved by the Father and dwelt by the Spirit. But second, look outward. You're surrounded right now by a cloud of witnesses. So not just men and women in the Bible, clearly, but also the saints and martyrs in the history of the church, the brothers and sisters sitting next to you in the pews, all the models and examples of what it means to believe. If you want to know who you are, look at them. Look at people who live this thing out. You see, because what God has done in and through baptism is He hasn't just given us His Spirit, as important as that is, don't mishear me, but He's also given us a family of people in whom His Spirit dwells. And so just like my two little boys, they will learn what it means to be a Simpson by looking up to who? To Christy and me. That's how they'll learn what it means to be a Simpson. In the same way, you and I, we learn what it means to be a Christian by looking up to those who have come before us. So again, first, look upward. Second, look outward. And now third, look inward. Meaning, look inside of yourself. And the thing is, even though this is the last one that I'm touching on, I want to say that's not meant to convey that it's not important. You can kind of come off that way, like, oh, we can just bypass this part and be spiritually healthy. No. Right? And so what I want to do, there's actually a long tradition in the history of the church of being emphatic about this, that we need to be self-aware. We need to know who we are. And so I want to read just a few examples of this. These are quotes that I've come across in my reading. The first one is from St. Augustine. This would have been the 300s, like kind of early in the church. And here's what he says. He says, how can you let me slow that down. Now, how can you draw close to God when you are far from yourself? Implication being, it's not possible. And then he prays, grant, O Lord, that I may know myself so that I may know thee. They're connected, right? Self-awareness and God-awareness. Another one is St. Teresa of Avila. She was a Catholic mystic in the 1500s, right around the same time as Martin Luther. What she said, I actually love this one. It's probably my favorite. She said this. She said, almost all problems in the spiritual life, stem from a lack of self-knowledge. And so it's possible that at this point you're kind of writing this off as like a Catholic or a mystic thing, right? That's all he's quoting. So let me quote from you from John Calvin. Anything but a Catholic or a mystic, right? And so he says this. He says, our wisdom consists, this is Christian wisdom, our wisdom consists almost entirely of two parts, the knowledge of God and of ourselves. Here's what he says. He says, but these are connected together by many ties. And it is not easy to determine which of the two precedes and gives birth to the other. And so all of this is to say it's incredibly important to know yourself. In other words, actually in agreement with our culture. We really do need to look inside. It's just not the first move, but we really do need to look inside. And the thing is, when you do, what you're going to find is you are a combination of two things. You are a combination of, on the one hand, inner beauty, and on the other hand, inner brokenness. I think sometimes our culture says, we are nothing but beauty. It's like, okay, I don't really believe that. But then Christians will kind of overreact and say, no, we are nothing but broken. And yet, no, it's not true. Neither of those are true. We are both at the same time. And so what that means is God has made you with a unique personality. God has made you with a unique personality that is actually valuable to the world around you. And you need to learn what that is so that you can live out your calling, right? And don't get puffed up about it or be proud and arrogant or anything like that. That's not what I'm saying. But what I am saying is do not miss the fact that you are fearfully and wonderfully made. That you are God's poiema, to steal our sermon series title, right? His poem, his handiwork, his masterpiece. And so you've got to look inside and see what is the unique way God has made you. And that's the inner beauty that you're going to see. And at the same time, you've got to look in and see what are all of the ways that you unmake yourself. He made you good. But what are all of the ways you unmake his work? And that's the inner brokenness. You see, if you are secure in the love of the Father, you've looked upward, you've grasped that, you can look at that stuff head on, that brokenness, and you can actually ask for healing and help. And that's what grace is. That's the promise of grace in baptism. It's healing and it's help. So one thing that's been helpful to me that I thought I would share with you, there's a guy named Ignatius of Loyola. I'm quoting a lot of church people today, apparently. That's a new thing. But Ignatius of Loyola High School is named after him, if you don't know that. But he wrote a lot about how to discern different spirits, like movements of different spirits around you and in your life. And in particular, he's got this list of 14 rules for that. And the 14th rule in particular, I want to read it to you. Here's what he says about how to discern our enemy. That's what he's talking about. So he says this. He says, as the captain of an army pitching his camp and looking at the forces or defenses of a stronghold, attacks it on the weakest side. So he's saying, if you're a general of an army and you surround your enemy, you're always going to attack its weaknesses, right? So here's what he says. In the same way, the enemy of human nature, roaming about us, looks in turn at all of our virtues And where he finds us weakest and most in need, there he attacks us repeatedly. You see what he's getting at, if you're like, what is he talking about? Is if you look at your life, typically what you will see is a pattern of brokenness. It's really uncommon for sin to be like a one-off thing, like, oh, I don't know where that came from. No. It's usually a pattern of brokenness. And in particular, there is usually just a couple of areas where you will continuously struggle your whole life long. You see, part of winning the battle is just knowing that so that you can ask for help. It's being aware enough to know the follies or the failures that you are prone to, and then bringing that before the God who loves you. And so, trying to emphasize it, don't miss this step. Don't miss it. We've got to look inward, know ourselves. And so with that, let's go back to this question. Kind of recap, summarize. Who are you? Who are you? The answer that God has given us through baptism is you're beloved by the Father and dwelt by the Spirit. So please look up. That's who you are. You're also surrounded by a great cloud of witnesses. You're part of a family of incredible examples. So look out. Learn from their life. And finally, you are a combination of brokenness and beauty. And it's incredibly important that you claim what has beauty. Claim it, right? Thinking of the C.S. Lewis quote, humility is not thinking less of yourself, it's thinking of yourself less, right? So claim what has beauty. At the same time that you become more and more aware of where you're broken. So look in. Know yourself. You see, that is how we locate our identity. So theologians, I can kind of wrap this up. Theologians will talk about something that they call eschatological realism, which I would suggest that this is precisely why no one listens to theologians. Right? Eschatological realism. It's actually kind of simple, the idea. Eschatology, or the eschaton, it just means the end of all time, so eschatological. And then realism is just, this is who you really are. Right? And so put them together. Eschatological realism means that your real identity isn't who you are right now, but instead who you are becoming. So what that means your past isn't you, right? That's not what you're becoming. You're not becoming your past. That's not you. Your present state of being is not you as well. Instead, the real you is who you are becoming. So the question I want to leave you with today as we go, we're not going to go quite yet. But the question I want to leave you with, we started with, who are you? But perhaps the better question is, who are you becoming? What direction are you headed? And I think you boil it down, there are two options. It's either you become more and more beloved by the Father and indwelt by His Spirit, or you become more and more bereft of the Father. And fumbling through life. See, a lot of us here have been baptized into Christ, a lot of us. And yet on any given week, I would imagine that almost all of us give ourselves to all sorts of things that are contrary to that God-given identity. Contrary to Christ, that is. And then I don't know about you, but when I do this, then I often wonder why I don't love what I'm becoming. And if I could just give us an answer to that. It's that, yeah, we've been baptized into Christ. That is our identity, but that identity never will take root automatically. It's not the way it works. Instead, it is like a seed of beautiful potential planted on the soil of a broken nature. And so in closing, I want to encourage, if not implore you, to claim the gift that God has given you in and through baptism, that seed. May the soil of your heart not be hardened by the deceitfulness of sin, but instead let it be softened by the loveliness of grace. Let's pray together. Lord God in heaven, for the gift of Jesus Christ, we give you thanks that you've called us into him, to be incorporated into him, that for a lot of us we've been baptized into him, and that this is our identity that you've given us, God. And yet, Lord God, you know all too well that we just rarely claim that. Much less do we live into it and become one with Jesus. And so, Father, in your mercy, we pray that you would change that. Even if just this week we'll offer a humble prayer, make us more aware of who we are by virtue of your grace. And at the same time, make us more resolved to make decisions and choices that are in accord with that and not contrary to this identity, this beautiful identity that you have bestowed on a broken people. And so help us to heal, Lord God. We pray this in Jesus' name. And all God's people said, Amen.